All right, I'm currently on the line with Jimmy Maddon. He's another musician that reached out about the interview session. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
All right, everybody. My name's Jimmy Maddon. I'm from Sheffield, UK. I'm a sort of glam rock singer-songwriter, slowly trying to bring glam rock and Mark Bolan back to the pop charts, albeit quite slowly. Um, I often describe myself as a poor Queen tribute imitation. And hopefully one day Brian maybe hears that and sees that as a compliment. Um, and yeah, I'm just trying to bring back the theatrical flair that was great with that, you know, mid late 70s rock and roll. But of course, with that slight modern day twist that gives it the commercialism that I pretend not to do.
All right. Well, we will definitely talk about all of that. For the moment, let's kind of touch base on some details about how this all started for you. Give me some information about what music was like for you growing up. What was the environment like that led you into pursuing music?
Yeah, so I mean, musically, like growing up, there's always music in my house, on the radios and stuff like that. Neither my parents play instruments or particularly musically minded, but I always loved it. You know, my earliest memories are, it will sound very old-fashioned now, but sitting by the stereo speaker with a pair of like telephone cable corded headphones, just listening to records. You know, my mum and dad had. To be fair, they got a great taste in music. And watching sort of DVDs and videos of, well, probably more so DVDs before I make myself sound ancient, but of all those great bands playing and just wanting to do, you know, watching guys like Freddie Mercury on stage and going, you know, I want to do that. I want to be that. Um, you know, and then it was sort of got to the age where you could sort of start to pursue music, and learn and kind of went from there and really have never really looked back.
Okay, so let's dive into a couple of those sections there. You mentioned that you kind of saw Freddie Mercury and Queen and kind of wanted to pursue that sort of presentation and theatrical performance. Does that mean that you were kind of primarily focused on doing vocals and that sort of presentation, or did you also find an instrument that you're passionate about?
Sort of wanted to be a more really. Fortunately, I had a friend growing up who was a drummer and would sort of be dragged along, you know, to my living room to drum in the Roger Taylor style because I really then want to be Queen, but it was a singer, you know. I mean, like my early once I started learning I started on the bass guitar, and then quickly realised that that doesn't get very much attention from girls, so I sort of moved on to the electric guitar, um, after so long. And in those early days, it was very Elvis and Johnny Cash, the stuff that I was playing at the time. So I wanted to be a singer and performer as sort of a guitarist, and I think I went for a very sort of 1950s phase in the mid 2000s, sort of 2010s era, which was very uncool then. You know, to have an Elvis haircut, sort of 15. Um, you know, so I really, the best answer to that is I kind of want to be an all-round musician. You know, I want to be able to play everything, and so I could create music that I was starting to hear in my head.
Sure. So you mentioned that you had a buddy come over and play drums. Did you also have some other friends come over and fill in for other instruments?
Yeah, so sort of during high school, particularly, we knocked about with a couple of bands, and you know, a great friend of mine growing up was a sort of rock and roll enthusiast like myself, and was a very proficient guitarist, much more than me on lead stuff. You know, so we would knock about different bands, and we had a mate played trumpet and trombone, and they would sort of swing in and stuff like that. So the early days were a band, and this were the days where, you know, the technology wasn't readily available. You had to learn by ear. You had to remember what, you know, if you wrote a song, you had to remember it if you hadn't written it down. You know, it's not like now where, you know, you can watch video tutorials and pull up tabs and chords, and you know, on your phone there's programs that you know, record down what you're doing. Um, So we just played really. It was, I think the band then, I don't think any of us thought that was a ticket to success. But we were just playing for love playing, which I don't think enough people do now. But we were just playing because we were given the space and we could play music, we could make sounds, whether they're good or they weren't. We're just kids trying to figure it all out. Ambitious kids.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's talk about what came after that. Once you kind of got into the habit of that and realized that you did have a passion for it, how did you keep that in your life? What was kind of the next steps?
Um, yeah, I think I quickly worked out that you can have quite a good ego as a musician. So I thought I'll go solo. You know what? I left the high school band and I went solo. I had my sort of, my moment, like it was David Lee Roth. So and then I went out and I remember I really got into music in the last year of high school. When I turned 18, it started that final year. So I was out in bars and stuff playing gigs pretty early on, and I was sort of finding it quite hard to go back to that school mentality. And I just read Bob Geldof's autobiography at the time where he just dropped out before the end, and I thought, look, Sir Bob can, then I will. So I actually quit high school 10 weeks from graduating because I was already out playing shows and traveling around. Um, so I got out of that scene and into music very quickly because it's just what I want to do. It it the stage made sense all of a sudden. Going from the confines of high school and the regimentation of it to into bars and stages with the freaks and the chaos and the outsiders. The
Sure.
people at the back of the room. It all made sense, and I was like, right, these people are creating what they believe
So
in music,
you
and I could.
mentioned as a part of that process, you kind of it embodied the solo singer songwriter kind of presentation for your shows. Is that kind of the way that you've developed entirely as a musician, or did you ever kind of want to do that full band kind of setup?
I've put bands together for like big tours and certain shows, over the years. I've never really stuck to one band. I mean, I've sort of moved around the world a bit, so it's always obviously, you often leave members behind, or they go in a different direction. But in the studio, I primarily would try and track everything myself. Except I'm not great on the drums, I confess, or the piano as much as I'd love to be better at it. So in the studio, I can hear it in my head, so I tend to lay down the law what's going on, unless there's something that I know I can't achieve, where I bring someone in, or the sound engineer, might step up. But yeah, that sort of solo singer songwriter thing, is maybe it's ego, maybe it's control, but it's certainly just the direct. As much as I probably would love to have a band, or even a side project band.
Well, I think
Um,
that's fine if that's how things have worked out for you. And, when you do want a band, you can find the like session musicians to come in and, play shows for you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
no, and I think it's nice because sometimes people come in with a if they're not been working on it forever, they come in with a bit of a flair and a twist, which I always think is nice. Because I've always got a theory that every show should be different. In terms of maybe I'll just play a song slightly differently, or I'll go for a slightly different note. Sometimes a musician coming you're not familiar with will do something unexpected, and I think that keeps it exciting for me, but particularly for the people, watching.
Yeah, definitely. So, where does that kind of bring you up to now? What kind of projects do you have going on?
So at the moment, I've sort of really launched back into sort of music full time and all consuming. I had a record come out earlier in the year from a label I was on sort of late last year. Um, and really, I think the plan, I've got quite a back catalogue of songs that are being written. So I think the plan will be for the rest of this year, try and get as many out, maybe a Christmas song. I think I'm probably at that point in my career where it's expected, um, and with the great fear of it being my alias Magnus, that will forever be what my name's attached to. So I think the rest of this will be a lot of, I've done quite a lot of shows recently and stuff like that. And then, we got things like a tour of America and Japan that, sort of just need to sort of pull the trigger on, and hopefully have some new music to follow with that.
Well, it definitely sounds like you kind of have a good ambition for what you're looking for. You mentioned a couple tours there that you're hoping to get set up as well. So, where do you kind of want to see all of it go? In a few years, like 5, 10 years down the road, what do you kind of see for yourself?
I used to say by 27 I'll be famous and dead. And then sort of I got past that age and realized I wasn't famous nor uh, looking like carking it. So,
Hmm.
it's the same ambition I had at 14, which is Wembley or like Madison Square Garden. So I want to be. I always think that a lot of musicians probably want that and they don't want to say it. I've always just felt, why hide from what you want, what you're achieving? I've always said you can fail at something, but give it a go. So I make no secret of that. I want to be playing, those massive stadiums. I think, the to do a show like, like Madison Square, for example, in the States, or the Hollywood Bowl, I think would just be, you know amazing to know that you've done that. Um, and then I've always had this great ambition and dream of being the first man to play a gig on the moon. Um, and it's something that my wife, now on our first date, it wasn't going very well at the beginning, and I thought I'll save her by telling her that I want to play a gig on the moon, and every now and then she likes to remind me that I've not yet achieved that, or um, it's dream big, really.
Well, I for one absolutely encourage your literally stellar ambitions. What are some of your favorite memories that you've had in the time that you've been working and playing music?
Outside of sort of I mean, it's a really good one. So, like in terms of like in the studio, I think the first time that something came together. I mean, I've spoken about this before. One of my great early memories is the drummer mate I had in high school. His dad was an old musician. I took like a sort of 4-track recorder in the house. So we would start to demo up songs that I'd written, and I very much was in the Jim Morrison era with some of the lyrics. I'm glad none of them really survived, because it was a very poor attempt of Jim Morrison. But we used to go into his bedroom and we'd record up these tracks. And I just have this great memory of us figuring out. I had the bass guitar and the electric guitar, but we would feed the drum kit into one and bass guitar in. We'll bounce it down. We'll put the guitar on the top. We'll bounce it down. I'll put a solo on. We'll bounce it down. I'll layer up harmonies in my Brian May attempt. We'll bounce more down. Vocals on, and this thing being compressed, 100 times over, like some sort of Beatles on speed. And and we'll put it onto a CD at the end, and we'll have this finished product. And I remember it was such early, we were working with old technology, but we didn't know what we were doing. We had a plan, and we'll figure it out as we go along. Somewhere in the vaults, I've got those recordings. So it's just such a great memory of the fun of, we just would try and, because there was no manual, there's no playbook, on how to record, and we're just figuring it out. I mean, and then to the extreme levels, when I did a tour of Asia, the first time I played a festival, I think the last show was this big festival thing. And the warm-up act before me was a snake charmer. And he left all his snakes in the boxes behind me on the stage. And if you look, there's a picture of me on stage, the snakes in the box behind me and me on the front. If you look into the crowd, he's out there in the crowd with one of the snakes wrapped around his neck. And I was just, for all of 20 at the 19 or 20 at the time, and you're just thinking, what is going on here? It was just madness. And those are the memories of the sort of the moments you look back on now and go, I'm kind of glad I've always got that memory.
Yeah, definitely. That that's kind of why I always ask that question, because I want the opportunity for people to share those memories that they have, so they can always be reminded of them. All right. Well, where can people find your music and check you out, and then follow your shows and tours when you put them on?
So I'm on all good social media platforms except for TikTok. I sort of drew the line at that one, but I'm feeling begrudgingly pressured into to join the platform. But Twitter, or X as it's now known, Facebook, Instagram, Jimmy Maddon, Maddon, one word. What, Jimmy Maddon? Jimmy Maddon official, just in case you get me confused with the Jimmy Maddon tribute acts that are out there on YouTube, where you sort of see like monthly vlog updates of what I've been doing and behind the scene things and video rushes and all of that. Um, so really, if you just Jimmy Maddon into anywhere, I'm inevitably going to pop up.
All right, perfect. So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So what's a message that you have that you would want to share with other people?
It has to be never stop believing in your dreams. That life will throw everything at you to stop, and so many people stop because it's easier to stop and to work with what's pushing you against you, which is societal expectations. I just think never stop, never you know never be that guy who talks about how he used to read or used to play the guitar or used to paint. you know um Never stop, because you just never know that next song, writing, picture, film could be the one that changes your whole life.